Hello everybody, welcome back. If you haven't been here before, my name is Debbie and I read a lot of books, and today I've got an audiobook for you. This one is The Hierarchies by Ros Anderson. I heard Jen Campbell talk about this book on her YouTube channel, and whenever she described it I just thought, that just sounds like a really interesting premise. Yeah, thanks Jen Campbell. I hope she's doing all well with a newborn because she just had a baby, so she's taking a break. She has no idea who I am, but still. It was described as almost a dystopia, sci-fi kind of situation with remnants of like Handmaid's Tale in there. And The Handmaid's Tale is one of my favourite books, so yeah. And it's a debut novel as well, so yeah, I'll just read that blurb to you and I'll go through what my feelings were about this book. What is love or consent if you're programmed to obey? Sylvie is a fully sentient robot designed to cater to her husband's every whim. She lives alone on the top floor of his luxurious home, her existence barely tolerated by his human wife and concealed from their child. Between her husband's visits, deeply curious about the world beyond her room, Sylvie watches the family in the garden, hears them laugh, cry and argue. Longing to experience more of life, she confides her hopes and fears only to her diary. But are such thoughts allowed? And if not, what might the punishment be? As Sylvie learns more about the world and becomes more aware of her place within it, something shifts inside her. Is she malfunctioning, as her husband thinks, or coming into her own? As their interactions become increasingly fraught, she fears he might send her back to the factory for reprogramming. If that happens, her hidden diary could be her only link to everything that came before, and the only clue that she is in grave danger. So the duration on listening to it is 10 hours and 23 minutes. I did this on 1.5 speed, so it wasn't quite that. I listened to it on my walks at work. I work in a basement, so you don't really see much of daylight, so I get my daylight on my lunch breaks. I have an hour for lunch, so it allows me to do what is essentially a 2.5 mile walk now. But yeah, so it's in science fiction, contemporary and cyberpunk. So yeah, it's all done from the point of view of Sylvie, which is spelt sylv.ie. This was such a weird, interesting one to learn because what you find out about in the blurb probably doesn't cover that much of the book, actually. It probably only covers maybe like the first, I don't actually know how many pages it is, but based on the listening to it, it feels like what is talked about in the blurb only takes up less than a quarter of the book, it feels. So yeah, so Sylvie, she's a robot and she's designed for her husband to have sex with. That is the relationship that Sylvie the robot has with the husband, and she refers to him as her husband. So it's weird because even though you're seeing it from the point of view of a robot, you feel for Sylvie, even though she's a robot. And when she talks about her relationship with the husband and then the non-existent relationship that Sylvie has with the wife, I felt sorry for Sylvie. And then there were times I kind of had to like jerk myself awake almost and say, but she's a robot. And it's understandable why the wife is angry and jealous, because the wife, her husband is having sex with a robot, and this robot is trying to barge its way into the family. So it would be interesting if this was ever done from the point of view of the wife. There were elements of it that made me think of like the film like AI and Bicentennial Man and the Robin Williams film. I was getting so many like memories of those movies while reading this. There's also the fact because the voice, it's read by Catherine McEwen, and there was something quite satisfying about the rhythm of the voice, almost robotic, and then the humanising of that voice as it went on, if that makes any sense. I'm not sure if anybody else who was listening to the audiobook picked up on that. But yeah, there was a certain robotic rhythm to the voice in the beginning, and then as Sylvie kind of taps into the more human side of things, it would not be quite as robotic with that rhythm. Like it would relax slightly. But yeah, so you see Sylvie. The first section is just a list of numbers. That must have been ridiculous to have to read out. I think it was just a repetition of her number like her serial number almost. It's like 1011111. There's lots of ones in there, I remember that. I finished this like a week ago, but I just haven't had the chance to talk about this yet. But yeah, so it stewed in my mind thinking about this. And I find it interesting just how little the blurb actually says about this. She's at this house. It's at the top floor of the luxurious home, so she's basically in the attic, and the husband gives her a robotic bird at one point to look after, and also gives her a diary to write in, which obviously she's a robot, so you're just wondering why he gave her the diary. Like, he's trying to humanise her. And so she views a lot from the attic window looking out, and then there's a day towards the very beginning of the book where she realises a baby has joined the family, and got this robot essentially trying to work out the logistics of this family and trying to understand her place in the household, and trying to work out if she should be helping to look after the child. Because she's there thinking, well, I have access to this information that tells me that if a baby is crying, it needs to be soothed and picked up, and if the baby cries for longer than she thinks it should be crying for, she's just like, oh, do I need to go find out what's going on? Do I need to go find the wife? Do I need to look after the child? But obviously the wife doesn't actually want the robot involved with the child's life, because she's just there thinking, no, you're my husband's robot plaything. So why on earth would you want to step out of the attic and help me with my child? And then there comes a point where Sylvie has a moment with the child in the garden, I think it is. Oh, was that the second one? Because there's one where she goes down into the room to soothe the child, and then they later found out that Sylvie was in the room because something dropped off her. I think it was a pin or something. So they had evidence that Sylvie was in the room. And then there was also another event in the garden between Sylvie and the child as well. I think that one was later when she came back. So yeah, there was an incident where then Sylvie is sent off to the hospital, where she has her memory wiped. She's essentially serviced as a robot and then sent home. And it's when she's sent home that she realises just how long she's been away for. She realises, oh, hang on a second, that child was a baby the last time I remember, and now it's a toddler. So I've been away for at least 2-3 years possibly. And so she's trying to piece together like what happened during that time. She doesn't really know exactly what happened that got her sent away to be fixed. And yeah, it's insane to read it from the point of view of a robot, but at the same time you feel for the robot almost as if it's a human, but it's not. And it's an interesting relationship to have with a book when you're looking from a character that is not supposed to be a person. It develops out to the point where she doesn't live in the house anymore, and you've got all these other things happening, and like the sections where she is being fixed at the hospital, and you see the people that are taking advantage of her as a robot while she's in the hospital. I definitely understand the comparison to Handmaid's Tale, because the fact is these robots are designed to have sex with. It's not about procreation there, it's just being an outlet for the men to have sex with. That's what Sylvie is, that's what a lot of these robots were built for. They were built for pleasure. So it's got kind of like that remnant of Handmaid's Tale, but not, because it's the idea that these robots are designed for sex. But in Handmaid's Tale, obviously they're slaves because they're fertile. So it's like that compare and contrast situation where it's just like, this would be an incredible like thing to study at, I don't know, if high school would be appropriate, I don't know, but somewhere for them to like study and do a comparison between the Hierarchies and Handmaid's Tale, because while having lots of similarities, there's also a lot of things that aren't similar there, and so you have got that ability to compare and contrast the two novels. The Hierarchies kind of refers to essentially kind of like almost like a robot Bible where they've got rules to follow. That's how Sylvie ends up in kind of like murky waters in trying to understand that role that she has within the household and within the family, because she was just like, the Hierarchies tell me that I am designed for my husband, but being part of this household, I essentially feel part of this family. but at the same time she is not there to tread on anybody's toes. She's not supposed to be interfering with the family, but she still has a sense of duty to the child because it's connected to the husband. It's so interesting and fascinating, and all where it goes. The tagline on it is, "Your husband is the reason for your existence. You are here to serve him. You must not harm your husband, nor may you harm any human." That is essentially what the hierarchies are. That is like the rules to follow. But something happens which means that she ends up leaving the house, and then you follow her through her diaries and her trying to fill in the blanks from when she went off to get fixed and had her memories wiped, and trying to understand kind of like almost the shorthand that she used in her diary to explain what had happened. And then you follow her when she leaves and where she ends up, and some friendships that she makes and other people that she goes off to serve. So it's not just about the one family. Like, she does get another husband in this story, and yeah, so that's how it feels kind of slightly remnant of Handmaid's Tale, with the idea of, you know, you're here to please this family, but oh, actually you might, because you're just designed for this one thing, if it doesn't work out for some bizarre reason, you can just go somewhere else. It just is. I feel like I'm being very skirting on like what happens in this book, because there's so much that isn't in the blurb. That blurb really does cover a very small portion of the story at the beginning before she leaves. It says her diary could be her only link to everything that came before, but at the same time she reads between the lines of the diary and doesn't always get the answers that she wants, because she's there scared going, yeah, it's all here in black and white, but that doesn't actually help me. So I feel like the diary is a bit of a red herring as well. It's fascinating. It was a really good book. It would be an interesting one to like read again, but actually read it rather than listen to it. But yeah, I quite enjoyed it. As I said, it was read by Catherine McEwen and it's written by Ros Anderson. Yeah, I don't think I even showed you the front cover of this. Yeah, the hierarchies. It says, "What is love or consent if you're programmed to obey?" So that is the front cover of the audiobook. Yeah, I just found it really interesting to read from the point of view of a robot and have yourself come with identifying with a robot and feeling sorry for a robot, but actually realising actually the family has every right to be angry with what's happened here. It's that idea, like the idea that robots can eventually develop feelings and take over the world type situation. It's very that sci-fi thing of thinking how robots can go wrong. But I can definitely imagine this as a film very remnant of AI, artificial intelligence, Bicentennial Man, while also incorporating that Handmaid's Tale kind of feel. So yeah, if you like the sound of that, I recommend this book. And obviously it's not really a love story because she's a robot. She can't really feel love. She only knows what she has been programmed to know. There is a point in the book where somebody that she knows tries to make her feel something. Should I just say what it is? Because obviously she's been designed for sex, but she's not actually getting any pleasure out of it. So there's a point in the book where a character, I'm not going to spoil too much about like who it is and like how it comes about, but there is a point in the book where somebody kind of tinkers with her wiring to make her feel essentially what an orgasm would feel like, but for a robot. It's very... the wording of that section, I remember where I was hearing that section. I remember where I was on my walk when that bit came about. And I was just like, I feel like I'm in a very public area listening to something that's very sexy. But yeah, that moment when the person's just like, sex is, for humans, it's fun and pleasurable, but for you it's not. So now I'm going to take your motherboard, essentially, and do something to it that will give you an element, will give you an idea of how sex can feel for a real person. So that section was actually, it's kind of sexy and interesting and all and weird at the same time, but yeah, it's a really interesting book. It's quite fascinating, as I said, for fans of Handmaid's Tale, anything with a bit of sci-fi and robots. And as I said, for me, I was really getting elements of like Bicentennial Man and AI, artificial intelligence. I can't speak. I just thought about the fact that both of those films have Robin Williams in them. But yeah, The Hierarchies by Ros Anderson. If what I've said sounds interesting to you, there's your front cover. Yeah, I'm very interested in like reading it again and actually reading the words as opposed to listening to the audiobook. It's interesting where it ends as well. Oh God, I'm processing. I'm gonna shut up now. Because I don't want to spoil this book for people, because there's so much more to it than you realise. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already, and I will see you next time with another video. Thank you, love you lots. Bye.